Today we are talking to Alec Zeck, and he's kind of been propelled into the spotlight the last couple of years by being extremely outspoken about the whole situation, the narratives going on in the world, and speaking counter to that narrative. And it has both had some like profound consequences in one way, but also in other ways. And
we have been, along with everyone we know in Denmark, have been quoting you, and apparently you're unaware of that. So you're the one that we've all been like posting and quoting, and because what you write is just what we all feel and think. You just have a way and put it into words. So first of all, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
you've been a really big help, and it seems you've been a bigger help than you realize. So we are really appreciative of you, well, speaking truth to power, as you say.
But why did you start all this? Was it worth it? It must have had consequences for you.
That's a good question. And yes, it did. But the consequences for speaking, both as a future projection, like back when I wasn't aware of the consequences, and also in hindsight, it was totally worth it. Totally worth it to be the most authentic version of myself and authentically share what I'm observing, experiencing, information that I've come across, and how I see the world. Sharing that authentically is what everyone should do. Everyone, as long as they're coming from a position of love and compassion, and they're open to new information and new perspectives, everyone should be doing the same exact thing that I'm doing. And that's what I hope I can impress upon others. But so the reason I started speaking out, and I'll try to summarize this briefly, I grew up in a very chaotic, in an abusive household, for lack of a better term. And my mom was very codependent, and my dad was very physically, verbally, emotionally abusive. And as a result of some of the traumatic experiences that my family, the dynamic between my parents and then us as their children, myself and my two siblings. So obviously we experienced quite a bit of trauma. There's tons of trauma. And I never really dealt with any of that growing up. I just stuffed it down and then externalized my self-worth. My mom went to go see a psychiatrist, someone we view as, a professional, as an expert when it comes to anything to do with any mental issues that arise in life.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychiatrist didn't ask my mom about any of the trauma that she experienced. It was more so, hey, what are your symptoms? And maybe a 15-minute survey that she was given to sort of determine the best course of action. So it was not intentional, and it was not getting to the root whatsoever. But again, we thought these were experts, and it didn't even cross our mind. It was just, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. So after that 15-minute survey and a brief discussion, my mom was prescribed multiple benzodiazepines and SSRIs, so psychotropic medications. And my mom's health plummeted. And it was already in a very bad spot mentally, but it got much worse mentally and started getting physically very bad as well over the course of 10 years. And it was, I guess the best way to put it, the way that this system works in such a nefarious way is that we assumed that when my mom would have these bouts of, like some of the worst times, I'm talking, she would be hallucinating, not leaving her room for multiple weeks at a time. It was really, really dark, and in and out of mental hospitals, multiple suicide attempts. And in those down moments, we simply thought, just because the way the system works, like, oh, she just needs to go back to the expert and get new drugs. These drugs aren't working. She needs to get new ones.
Yeah.
And in her up moments, we thought, wow, the drugs are working well. Finally we see aspects of her that we haven't seen in 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 years. And it was this never ending, like, up and down, and the downs kept getting worse, and like ups were more rare and worse and worse and worse. And we were looking to put her in a long-term facility. This was during my senior year at the university that I went to, right before I commissioned as an officer in the Army, which I'll get to. And we were looking to put her in a long-term facility. And by chance, she had happened to see a therapist who was reading a book called A Mind of Your Own by Dr. Kelly Brogan. And this therapist recommended that my mom go see Dr. Kelly Brogan, because at the time, Dr. Brogan was still seeing patients individually. And of course, my mom went to go see Kelly. And had you looked up Kelly back then, or if you looked up Kelly now, especially, you would find that, according to Google, she is a pseudoscientific quack that spreads misinformation and disinformation online and is causing massive amounts of harm to people. Well, that wasn't our experience with Kelly whatsoever. Kelly, for lack of a better term, saved my mom's life. She helped my mom understand that my mom was not those labels and diagnoses, that my mom needed to adopt a more holistic approach to health. And that if she did that, if she treated food as a source of medicine, and was very intentional about her diet, about her mindfulness, about trauma healing, about exercise, that she could be well. In a matter of a few months, my mom began healing for the first time ever. And it's, still a healing process. She's still healing some of this, right? There's quite a bit of trauma that was stuffed down. But after seeing my mom begin to heal for the first time and begin to reverse those symptoms she had, my wife, who I had just married, was diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis 9 years prior to us getting married, right? And we got married basically right around when my mom began to heal. And my wife was under the care of multiple rheumatologists, had, chronic inflammation, was always in pain, was told she was always going to be this way, was told she was always going to need to be on different sets of immunosuppressive drugs. Oddly enough, one of them was hydroxychloroquine. And yeah.
Back when that was legal.
Yeah, back when that was legal.
Back in the day.
So funny though, is we got her off of that. So like she was on all of these drugs and multiple, just on a full gambit of different drugs for various things, because she would take one and it would have side effects, right? What I like to call primary effects. They would have these effects though that would lead to more symptoms, that would lead to more drugs, and it was just like this never-ending thing. And we tried the same approach that Kelly gave to my mom, this holistic approach. And after 4 months, my wife was like, oh my God, I feel incredible. I'm off all my medicine. Let's go get my blood work tested to see if my inflammation levels have dropped. And sure enough, for the first time in 10 years, the inflammation levels in her body were normal for the first time in 10 years. And the doctor, the rheumatologist, was sort of like, well, what'd you do? And she was like, well, I'm off all of my drugs, and I am just very mindful about my health. I am mindful in mind, body, and spirit. I pay attention to it, and I ensure that everything I'm doing is of benefit to my body, and treating food as a source of medicine for my body. And I'm very intentional about eating only organic. And the doctor was just like, okay, sounds good. And then that was it. But so those two experiences. Yeah,
Isn't it interesting?
Sorry.
Like when you come and you present this evidence, it's not like, okay, we need to dive into this. Like we need to do more of this, instead of just like, okay, this does not fit into my box. Disregard. You do what you want. I can't look at it.
Exactly. And so like, it was shocking to me, right? Because I see two people that I love that were under the care of what we call experts, right? That are supposed to know how to make you well, or how to keep you well, how to maintain health or produce health. And they were perpetually ill inside that system under the care of these experts. They step away and they begin to heal for the first time ever. And so for me, having really never questioned allopathic medicine, Western medicine, the system, and other aspects of it leading into government. And yeah, I had never really questioned any of it. I mean, I was a second lieutenant in the Army at this time. I was an Army officer, just graduated from the top public university in the United States, like huge thing. And this happens. And then I begin questioning everything, like, not only the health side of things, obviously venturing into the pharmaceutical industry, allopathic medicine, natural health, what has been covered up, coming across the number of holistic doctors that have been suicided, which is what I like to call them because they've very clearly been killed. And then going deeper into government corruption and what the government has been hiding from us, and the truth about 9/11, the truth about a number of things. And it sent me on this never-ending journey of questioning. And obviously it started with health, but then it ventured into having to question who I am and question my place in this world, and understand that up until this point, I had been externalizing my self-worth and looking for things out there to validate me, right? Like to make me feel good about me, instead of looking internally, instead of, getting to the root of why I was doing that, which was the trauma that I experienced. And I had a moment amidst months of childhood trauma healing where I broke down crying like crazy. And I had multiple moments crying, but this one was significant because I had this moment of in my head, like, I don't know who the hell I am. I have no idea who I am. And after, letting all those tears out and sitting there for a minute, I thought to myself, now I can be who I truly am. As weird as that, like it made sense at the time, but and especially in hindsight, because that's when I really stepped into being who I authentically am, and not wearing these, proverbial masks, trying to pretend to be someone to get acceptance from the external world. And so all of that comes to a head, and I begin this new process of who I am, but I'm still an officer in the Army, right? And I knew I wanted to get out of the Army more than likely. I was wanting to go back to school to either be a physical therapist or a chiropractor. And I wasn't really sure what exactly I wanted to do between the two of those, but I knew that the Army was no longer for me. I knew I no longer could be in the Army. I knew that I wanted to get away from the system in every aspect. But I didn't really have how do I put this? A transformational event had not happened yet. And then enter COVID. That's the transformational event that I needed. And yeah, right. And so when this charade began, I made a video February 29th, 2020, because I had already dove deep into trauma healing. I'd already dove deep into abuse, manipulation, gaslighting, and I had experienced all of that growing up, and healed it so I could recognize it. So that's what the government and the pharmaceutical industry and all these other entities, the media, are doing to us right now, scapegoating the people who are aware of what's going on. I'd already dealt with that. I'd already dealt with and researched pharmaceutical corruption. I'd seen two people that were in allopathic medicine be harmed, step away from it, begin to heal, see natural health be made out to be this thing that's causing people harm. And so as soon as COVID hit, February 29th, 2020, I made a video basically saying that this would no doubt be used for mandatory vaccines for all people. And I didn't post on social media. I never posted any of this stuff on social media. I would share, articles about vaccines here and there over the course of 5 years, but very rarely. Finally got to a breaking point around the end of April, beginning of May 2020, where I was like, okay, I can no longer be silent. I was in the Army as an officer in the government, working for the government, but I could no longer be silent. My convictions were greater than my complacency, as Dr. Ben Tapper, a good friend of mine, always says. And I had to speak. So I began speaking, and I began authentically sharing, always coming from a position of love and compassion, using very clever language, though, because at the time, again, I was still in the Army, so I could never speak ill of the government. So I would use words other than government officials. I would say things like, the experts or what have you. But that's my story.
Well, it's very condensed, but it mirrors like so many of the rest of us, like how we've, like when we are at a low point, like when we cannot take it anymore, and then we go and ask for help from the system, and then you like, they really get you, and you get put through that whole thing where you just get ground into bone meal as a product, and they use you in the system to like layer their cake. And yeah, so it's a common story, because that's basically how the whole system is. And if you haven't been there, then it's difficult to see. But that's also like all these many traumas that you have experienced and we have experienced. That's also where like the light can come in, so we can see and recognize all these patterns, which is why for many people who have had okay lives, like where
it only hurt a little.
Yeah, where the trauma was not severe enough to break them, they can still survive in the system. And because they can still survive in the system, they subconsciously know all this is going on. Like I'm sure that 90% of the people that don't want to see this, they know this, but because they can still survive in the system, they don't want to have the realization, because it would hurt too much to have to sit down in that. So it's the ones of us who have gone over the edge where we didn't have a choice anymore. We are the ones that end up like speaking out, and then we get all the shit storms that you have gotten. We have gotten nowhere near as severe treatment. No. But yeah, losing friends and all that stuff. So, and you're talking about like everyone should do this, but as long as you haven't hit that breaking point, like who wants to risk what little they have for that?
Well, it's risking what this facade, this false, I guess, house of cards is the best way to put it. It's risking that collapsing because of the false reality that they've built around themselves. Yeah. That they're not even happy in, that they don't even enjoy actually being in. But just like you said, they haven't reached a breaking point. They're just comfortable enough to remain inside that house of cards. And the moment you began speaking about how the foundation of it is corrupt, the house of cards has to come crumbling down. Yeah. So too many people cannot face that reality.
But it's coming to everyone now with all these planned things that they have in store, like food scarcity and all this. So everyone has to go through that, and that is why it's so great to have role models such as yourself standing out there and saying, hey, I did it, and I survived, and I'm thriving, and
I'm just me.
And and you're just 29-year-old white dude, as you said.
Really though, and that's like, I want to be that random 29-year-old white dude that shows every other random dude of any age, color, dudette, girl, guy, whatever, that yes, it may be scary to reach that breaking point individually, but right now we're reaching the collective breaking point. It's fast approaching. And it's better to step into that authenticity. I promise you, it may be scary, but on the back end of it, it is so worth it. I think I was sharing earlier the consequences of me speaking. Like, I was an officer in the Army, a West Point graduate. I was in the world-class athlete program just a few months prior, which is a very select program for the U.S. Army. And me speaking had a lot of potential consequences, and some of them did come to fruition. When I formed this organization that I've started, Health Freedom for Humanity, within 2 months, The Guardian, a news journal out of the UK, wrote a hit piece on me.
Oh yeah, I read it. That was like, wow. This whole thing with salt water. It's like, we know how well this stuff works. Like, and you sorry.
Let him tell it, because
sorry.
No, it's okay. It's fine. Yeah. Trying to say that, we're profiteering off of the pandemic is just absurd, like absurd. So like one of us that was featured in the article was selling like plasma water, which is like seawater that they filtered to have all the minerals in it, and selling that. And then my wife was an affiliate for TRS, which is a zeolite spray, which works really well. That has helped my wife tremendously.
It has healed so many people.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were trying to say that we were profiteering off that, of course, and then completely avoiding that they receive millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, mirror.
And, yeah, it's just, but so how that happened was a reporter contacted me, and when we formed Health Freedom for Humanity, we exploded because we're not better than, but just different than other health freedom organizations in that we are truly uniting people from all walks of life. And we mean that. I mean, we just had an event in California and we had people from all walks of life there. And that's what we want. We're just uniting, just people uniting in being educated and empowered for health freedom. And that's simply it. And we all have varying views, and some are germ theory minded, some are terrain theory minded, some are even pro-vaccine. That's okay. We just want to unite people under the reclamation and defense of health freedom, which is the right to choose what is best for your own health, right? So we exploded pretty rapidly when we formed our organization. And I was contacted by this reporter named Jasper Jackson, and he wrote, I'm publishing the following about you and your organization. You are an anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist that spreads misinformation online. You have 80,000 followers on Instagram. This, and at the bottom he said, you are a former Army officer. So I was like, because I was still in the Army. I was like, okay, he thinks I'm a former Army officer. I'm not going to reply to this. I'm just going to let him publish it. Hopefully this won't cause me any issues and it won't explode. A week later, I hadn't replied to him, and this is 2 days before the article is to be published. He messages me again and says, we have just confirmed with the U.S. Army Public Affairs Office that you are currently serving as a captain. And I was like, oh, here we go. So then 2 days later, published, I was contacted by my brigade commander, which is basically like my boss's boss's boss. And he was pretty pissed off. But again, going back to not being afraid and just being authentic, I explained, sir, my views on this topic were not formed in a vacuum. I did not just wake up one day and say that I was going to start speaking on something controversial. My life experiences have showed me this, and I've done extensive research on these topics. The opinions shared by our organization are not done without research. We have doctors of various types who are part of our organization, various other experts, if you want to call them that, which is a ridiculous term. And everything that we share can be backed up by legitimate data, government databases, or peer-reviewed studies. And he basically just said, don't get in trouble anymore and keep your head down until you get out. And then a few weeks later, I was out of the Army and I was, free to speak my mind. But then that's when the censorship started happening like crazy. And now I've been deleted from Instagram 7 times. My organization's been deleted from YouTube. Eventbrite removed our event from their platform. I've been deleted on Twitter twice now. I've been deleted everywhere. Yeah, I've been censored quite a bit.
It's so amazing. Like we're living in this time where all these things come to pass that people have been warning us about for so many years, and now it's actually happening. All this crazy censorship, thinking we're living in free countries.
I have so much sympathy for the people who have been shouting about this for the last 30-40 years.
Think about it.
It's been so hard.
A good friend of mine, Billy DeMoss, he's a really well-known chiropractor in the United States. He's pretty jaded. He's older, and he's been saying this for 40 years. He's been saying all of the things that are happening now for 40 years. And it's honestly kind of sad in many ways, because he's to the point where he's just like, screw it, let them die. If they want to take it, let them take it. I've been trying to warn people for 40 years, and people thought I was crazy, and here we are. But I'm so thankful for people like him, because it can be, especially back then, but even so now, it can be pretty demoralizing when you're constantly being made out to be some crazy conspiracy theorist, and I've had people wish death upon me. I've had people say that I'm deliberately causing people harm.
Yeah, me too.
But I always know that as long as I'm coming from a position of love and compassion, and I'm open to hearing other sides, and I'm not stifling conversation or shutting off those who oppose me, then I can't possibly be doing anything wrong by just sharing my authentic perceptions based on my experiences, based on my observations, based on what I've researched. As long as I'm doing so from a position of love and compassion, despite all of the hurdles to continue to speak, I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. So you having done all this healing work on yourself and being able to recognize all these patterns, are you seeing the same healing going on in the world right now, or do you think we have not gotten to that point yet? Like as a whole, as a collective?
It's so tough, because I think as a collective, for the most part, we are still stuffing down all of the bad things that are happening and are unwilling to look at it. And there's a balance here, right? There's stuff there's people even within like the health freedom or holistic health or spiritual space that are stuffing down and pretending that everything's all love and light. And yes, at the core, we are love and light, but there's elements of darkness there that need to be looked at, that need to be named, that need to be that people need to be made aware of, right?
Yeah.
And there's the spectrum over here, like I said, that is stuffing that darkness down continually, which allows the darkness to fester and grow and creep in behind the scenes, right? To the point where it will eventually explode. And I think we're getting to the point of explosion for many people, right? There's a lot of nuance here. Then there's the other side of the spectrum that is constantly focusing on the darkness. And that's what I see a lot of the people in this space, even myself previously to some extent, constantly focusing on the darkness, almost seeking out like, okay, what else are they doing? What else is going on? What else is coming? And the more we focus on the darkness, the more we perpetuate it. The more, in many ways, we become it, right? Which is why people, when they're constantly focusing on what they are doing, and I believe there is a they, but I think they ultimately play into our highest good, and I can touch on that as well. If we're constantly focusing on that, then we become a source of rage, of anger, of hate, to where we're then calling for the almost the same type of things, or wishing the same type of things that we say the other side is wishing upon us, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the balanced approach is. Okay, acknowledge what's going on in the world, name what's going on in the world, openly discuss what's going on in the world, but align our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions individually and in community to create something that makes that darkness obsolete. Not resisting the darkness, naming it, acknowledging it, building something better that makes that one fall to the wayside, because this one is so much more attractive individually and collectively. And that's the balanced approach that I think we need to be taking right now.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you just saw, head on over to whoselifeisitsummit.com/podcast, where you can find full-length episodes as well as in audio format, and we do a lot of other cool stuff. You can hang out with us and other like-minded individuals who want to create a world that works for everyone, and we do that on our platform, where we can chat, and we have Q&As and exclusive interviews as well. So there's so much to get over there. So come on over and play with us.